In January 2014, the body of 18-year-old Samantha Cole was found in the living room of a suburban home in Redwood Falls, Minnesota. An investigation uncovered the disturbing details of her obsessive relationship with high school coach Brandon Price. Beginning in the fall of 2013 at Redwood Falls High School, a series of events unfolded that would spiral into jealousy, betrayal, and ultimately a night of devastating violence. Brandon Price had always been the kind of man people gravitated toward. At just 28 years old, his charm and natural ability to connect with others made him a perfect fit for his role as the new basketball coach at Redwood Falls High School. His players admired him not just for his skills, but for how he seemed to truly care about their development on and off the court. Brandon wasn't just their coach, he was their mentor, a figure they could look up to. Brandon's personal life seemed just as perfect as his professional one. He had recently married Kate Price, his college sweetheart, in a beautiful ceremony on April 14, 2012. Kate was a kindergarten teacher known throughout Redwood Falls for her gentle demeanor and her love for children. Together, they had just moved into a cozy 3-bedroom house on the edge of town. The house wasn't large, but it was full of possibilities. Space for a nursery, a backyard for a swing set, and a future filled with the kind of love and warmth that Brandon and Kate had always dreamed of. For Brandon, the transition to married life was both exciting and challenging. Balancing the demands of his new job and his commitment to Kate required more energy than he had anticipated. Kate, ever supportive, encouraged him to pour his passion into his coaching, assuring him that they would always find time for each other. They spent weekends decorating their home and talking about their plans for the future. Kate even started collecting baby names, carefully jotting them down in a small notebook she kept by the bed. Samantha Cole, meanwhile, was living a very different life. At 17 years old, she was the star cheerleader of Redwood Falls High School. Her stunning looks and outgoing personality made her the center of attention wherever she went. But behind her radiant smile was a girl desperate for love and stability. Samantha had grown up in a broken home with parents who were more interested in their own arguments than in raising their daughter. Her father had left when she was 10, and her mother, battling alcoholism, barely managed to keep their small apartment livable. Samantha learned early on how to fend for herself. The instability at home shaped Samantha into a master manipulator. She knew how to use her beauty and charm to get what she wanted, and she wasn't afraid to push boundaries to escape the chaos of her personal life. Despite her popularity at school, Samantha carried a deep sense of insecurity. She longed for someone to see beyond her exterior, someone who would provide her with the love and validation she never received at home. Brandon became that someone. It started innocently enough. It was September 2012, and Brandon had been at Redwood Falls High School for just a few months. Samantha often stayed late after cheerleading practice, lingering near the gym to watch the basketball team. At first, it was just a harmless crush. She admired how confident Brandon was, how he commanded respect from his players while maintaining a sense of approachability. To Samantha, he wasn't just a coach. He was the kind of man she imagined could save her from the life she desperately wanted to leave behind. For Brandon, Samantha's attention was flattering. He was adjusting to his new role as a husband and a coach, but the pressures of both were starting to weigh on him. The late nights spent reviewing game strategies often meant less time with Kate, who was busy managing her classroom of energetic 5-year-olds. When Samantha began complimenting him, praising his coaching skills or commenting on his leadership, Brandon felt a sense of validation he hadn't realized he craved. By October 2012, their interactions had become more frequent. Samantha found reasons to talk to Brandon after practice, sometimes asking for advice about school or claiming she needed help with her cheer routines. Brandon, caught off guard by her attention but unwilling to be rude, always obliged. Their conversations were initially lighthearted, but over time they became more personal. Samantha spoke about her struggles at home, how she often felt like no one cared about her, how she longed for a better life. Brandon, with his natural tendency to mentor and support, found himself feeling protective of her. One evening in late October, after a particularly grueling practice, Brandon stayed late in his office to finish some paperwork. Samantha knocked on the door, claiming she had left her phone in the gym. When she entered, she thanked him for always being so kind to her. Samantha spoke about how much she admired him, not just as a coach, but as a person. She told him he was the only adult who seemed to truly care about her. For Brandon, the moment was emotionally complicated. He saw Samantha as a troubled young woman looking for guidance, but the intensity of her words made him feel something he wasn't ready to acknowledge. The line between teacher and student began to blur, and Brandon, though hesitant, didn't stop it from happening. By November 2012, their meetings had become more frequent. What started as casual conversations in the gym turned into private moments in Brandon's office after hours. Samantha, emboldened by Brandon's initial kindness, began to push boundaries. She dressed more provocatively during practices, ensuring she caught his attention. Brandon, battling a growing sense of guilt, tried to rationalize their interactions. He told himself he was simply being a mentor, a source of stability in Samantha's chaotic life. But Samantha wanted more. She craved Brandon's attention and grew frustrated when he tried to keep their relationship professional. She began testing him, lingering longer after practice, accidentally brushing against him during conversations, and finding excuses to text him outside of school hours. Samantha knew how to exploit Brandon's vulnerabilities, and she used every tool at her disposal to pull him closer. By December 2012, their relationship had crossed the line. Late one evening, after a home game, Brandon found himself alone in the gym with Samantha. The tension that had been building between them finally erupted in the quiet of the empty gym. With only the faint hum of the overhead lights, they shared their first intimate moment. Brandon, overwhelmed by a mix of desire and guilt, knew he had made a terrible mistake. But the connection they shared was undeniable, and Samantha wasn't about to let him go. Their affair became a carefully guarded secret. They met late at night in Brandon's office or under the bleachers when they were sure no one else was around. Samantha was careful to maintain her image at school, but her obsession with Brandon grew stronger with each passing day. For Brandon, the affair became a source of constant inner turmoil. He loved his wife and hated himself for betraying her, but he couldn't seem to extricate himself from Samantha's grasp. By January 2013, the cracks in their secret began to show. Samantha grew increasingly possessive, often texting Brandon late at night and demanding his attention. She would ask probing questions about his marriage, fishing for signs that he was unhappy with Kate. Brandon, trying to salvage what remained of his conscience, began to pull away. But Samantha wouldn't allow it. For her, the affair wasn't just a fling. It was her lifeline, her escape from a life she despised. Samantha's obsession reached a breaking point when she noticed Kate attending more of Brandon's games. The way he smiled at his wife, the pride he showed when introducing her to his players, drove Samantha into a jealous rage. She couldn't stand the thought of Brandon giving Kate the love and attention she believed should be hers. The stage was set for a confrontation that would forever change their lives. What began as a reckless indulgence had become a dangerous entanglement, one that neither Brandon nor Samantha could control. What would Samantha do next, and how far would she go to keep Brandon by her side? By July 2013, life for Brandon and Kate Price seemed picture-perfect to the outside world. They were a young, beautiful couple with a promising future. Kate, who had always been the backbone of their relationship, exuded grace and positivity despite Brandon's long hours as a basketball coach. She made it a point to attend every game she could, her growing belly a proud sign of the life they were building together. But underneath the smiles and loving gestures, Brandon carried a burden that grew heavier with each passing day. His affair with Samantha had spiraled out of control, morphing from a reckless mistake into a source of constant fear and anxiety. Samantha's obsession had become relentless. Her once flirtatious texts were now desperate messages demanding his attention. She would show up unannounced at the gym, waiting for him after practice, her eyes burning with a mix of anger and longing. Samantha's world revolved entirely around Brandon. Her obsession consumed her, fueled by the emptiness of her own life. She had no family to turn to, no true friends to confide in. Her grades began to slip, and her attendance at cheerleading practice became erratic. Samantha's coach grew concerned, but Samantha brushed off the questions with vague excuses. Behind closed doors, however, her jealousy of Kate had reached a fever pitch. On August 14, 2013, everything changed. During a game at Redwood Falls High School, Kate made an unexpected appearance. She wore a loose-fitting dress that barely concealed her growing baby bump. Brandon spotted her in the stands and couldn't help the smile that spread across his face. To him, Kate was a beacon of light in his dark and complicated world. Samantha, standing on the sidelines in her cheerleading uniform, saw the exchange and felt a surge of uncontrollable rage. Samantha couldn't comprehend how Brandon could still love his wife when she, Samantha, had risked everything for him. She hated the way his face lit up for Kate, the way his gaze lingered on her even as he coached the game. That night, when Kate approached Brandon to congratulate him, Samantha stood in the shadows, watching them with a clenched jaw and trembling hands. The announcement of Kate's pregnancy, made casually to a group of players and their families after the game, was the final blow. Samantha left the gym abruptly, slamming the door behind her as she fought back tears. To her, the pregnancy was a betrayal, a permanent symbol of Brandon's love for his wife and the life he was building without her. From that moment on, Samantha's thoughts became consumed with one goal: removing Kate from the picture. Brandon, oblivious to the storm brewing in Samantha's mind, decided it was time to end the affair once and for all. On August 20th, 2013, after a late practice, he called Samantha into his office. What he intended to be a final conversation quickly turned into a volatile confrontation. Samantha begged, threatened, and cried, alternating between declaring her love for him and warning him about what she could do if he left her. Brandon remained firm, walking away from her sobs echoing in the empty gym. By November 1st, 2013, Samantha's obsession had reached dangerous new heights. Brandon had stopped responding to her texts and avoided her as much as possible. Her carefully constructed world of manipulation and control was crumbling, and she was determined to reclaim the power she felt slipping through her fingers. That rainy afternoon, Samantha drove to the Price household. She knew Brandon wouldn't be home. He was at the school, preparing for an upcoming tournament. Samantha had no real plan, only the determination to see Kate face to face. As she pulled into the driveway, her mind raced with possibilities. If she could just talk to Kate, maybe she could scare her enough to make her leave Brandon. Or perhaps she could find something, anything, that would give her leverage over them. Kate, ever the gracious hostess, answered the door with a warm smile, despite the rain. She didn't know Samantha well, but recognized her from the cheerleading team. Samantha feigned politeness, claiming she had forgotten her jacket in Brandon's car and needed to ask him something. Kate, not suspecting anything, invited her inside and offered her a glass of water. Samantha accepted, her eyes darting around the house as she stepped into the kitchen. It was then that she noticed the cup of tea sitting on the counter. Kate had been drinking it earlier while tidying up. The idea struck Samantha like lightning. She had no real plan, but the opportunity seemed too perfect to pass up. As Kate turned her back to retrieve the water, Samantha slipped a small vial of poison, hidden in her bag, into the tea. Her hands trembled as she poured the liquid, her heart racing at the thought of what she was about to do. Samantha didn't stick around long. She thanked Kate and left, her heart pounding as she walked back to her car. She told herself it was just enough poison to make Kate sick, to scare her into leaving Brandon, but deep down, she wanted more. She wanted to erase Kate from Brandon's life entirely. Later that evening, Kate began to feel unwell. At first, it was just a dull ache in her stomach, but by midnight, the pain had become unbearable. Brandon rushed her to Redwood County General Hospital, panic etched across his face. The doctors worked quickly, but the damage was done. Kate had suffered a miscarriage, and the baby they had dreamed of was gone. Brandon was devastated, but his grief quickly turned to suspicion. Something about the timing felt off. Samantha had been at the house earlier that day, uninvited, unexpected. The thought gnawed at him, but he had no proof. When he confronted Samantha the next day, she denied everything, her expression cold and unyielding. She warned him that he hadn't seen what she was truly capable of. Brandon didn't know how to protect his wife from the growing storm, but he knew one thing for certain. Samantha wasn't going to let go without a fight. By January 2014, the lives of Brandon, Kate, and Samantha were already in shambles, though the world around them remained oblivious. Samantha's obsession had reached its breaking point. Her once charming and flirtatious demeanor had become erratic and unhinged. At 18 years old, Samantha had become consumed by her fixation on Brandon, seeing him not as a person, but as a possession, a life raft in the storm of her broken world. She felt betrayed not only by Brandon's rejection, but by Kate's continued presence in his life, a presence that symbolized everything Samantha believed she could never have. Brandon, meanwhile, was living in constant fear. He had distanced himself as much as he could from Samantha after the poisoning incident, but knew deep down that she was a threat. He hadn't told Kate the full extent of the affair, trying to shield her from the worst of it, but the guilt weighed heavily on him. Brandon had grown quieter, more withdrawn. He threw himself into his coaching, often taking on extra practices or games to avoid facing the crumbling remains of his personal life. Kate, still recovering from the loss of their baby, noticed the distance but attributed it to grief. By early January, she had begun to rebuild herself emotionally, leaning on her parents and close friends for support. She spent her days preparing their home for a fresh start, hoping the arrival of spring might bring a sense of renewal. She was determined to repair her marriage, unaware of the true depth of Brandon's betrayal or the danger lurking in the shadows. Samantha, however, could not move on. For her, the months following the poisoning had been a blur of rage and despair. She spent hours scrolling through Brandon's social media, analyzing every post and photo for signs of happiness with Kate. The sight of the couple together fueled her growing hatred. By January 10th, 2014, Samantha made a decision. If she couldn't have Brandon, no one could. On the evening of January 15th, 2014, Samantha put her plan into action. She knew Brandon would be away coaching an away game, leaving the house empty except for Kate. Armed with a handgun she had stolen from her stepfather months earlier, Samantha drove to the Price home. The neighborhood was quiet, the streetlights casting long shadows over the suburban lawns. She parked a few houses down and walked the rest of the way, the cold air biting at her skin as she rehearsed what she would say to Kate. Breaking into the house was easier than Samantha had anticipated. The back door had been left unlocked, a mistake often made in the small, trusting community of Redwood Falls. Inside, the house was warm and still, a stark contrast to Samantha's chaotic mind. She wandered through the living room, her fingers brushing over picture frames on the mantel. Each photo of Brandon and Kate smiling together only deepened her resolve. Samantha didn't have to wait long. At around 8:45 p.m., Kate returned home, her arms full of groceries. She was startled to find Samantha sitting in the living room, but her natural politeness kept her from reacting harshly. Samantha's calm exterior quickly dissolved into anger, and she began accusing Kate of ruining her life. Kate was confused and scared, but she tried to reason with Samantha, keeping her voice steady as she backed toward the kitchen. Samantha followed, pulling the gun from her jacket. The sight of the weapon changed everything. Kate's fear became palpable, but she kept her composure. She knew she needed help and, thinking quickly, reached for her phone on the counter. Pretending to fumble with it, she managed to dial 911 and whisper her address before Samantha realized what she was doing. When Samantha heard the faint voice of the dispatcher on the other end of the line, her panic erupted. She grabbed Kate by the arm and pulled her into the living room, yelling at her to sit down. Kate complied, her heart racing as she tried to think of a way to escape. The minutes felt like hours as they waited for the inevitable arrival of the police. At 9:03 p.m., the sound of sirens filled the air. Samantha's desperation turned to fury. She accused Kate of calling the police, waving the gun erratically as she paced the room. When the first patrol cars from the Redwood Falls Police Department pulled into the driveway, Samantha's erratic behavior escalated. She fired a shot, grazing Kate's shoulder. The pain was sharp and immediate, but Kate used the chaos to crawl behind a couch, shielding herself as best she could. The police, hearing the gunshot, moved quickly. They shouted commands from outside, trying to negotiate with Samantha, but she was beyond reasoning. Samantha barricaded herself in the house, firing wildly at the officers. In the chaos, one officer was struck and killed, a 32-year-old father of two whose life was also claimed by this tragic night. By 9:20 p.m., the standoff reached its climax. The police stormed the house, their movements swift and decisive. Samantha fired at them, her shots wild and panicked. The officers returned fire, and Samantha was struck multiple times. She collapsed in the living room, her blood pooling on the hardwood floor, her obsession and rage extinguished in an instant. The events of January 15, 2014, left the Redwood Falls community in shock. The once quiet neighborhood became a crime scene, the flashing lights of police cars illuminating the tragedy that had unfolded. News of the murder spread quickly, and within hours, Brandon's affair with Samantha was exposed. The revelation destroyed Brandon's reputation. Parents withdrew their children from his team, demanding his resignation. Though Brandon cooperated fully with the investigation, admitting his role in the events that led to the tragedy, the public viewed him as complicit. By February 2014, Brandon had resigned from his position and disappeared from public life, retreating to an unknown location to escape the scrutiny. Kate survived her physical injuries but struggled to recover emotionally. By March 2014, she had moved back in with her parents, filing for divorce shortly after. The betrayal and trauma were too much for her to bear, and she could no longer see a future with Brandon. Her once bright outlook on life was dimmed, replaced by the weight of grief and betrayal. Samantha's story became a cautionary tale. The media painted her as a troubled young woman, a victim of her circumstances, but also a perpetrator of unimaginable violence. Debates about mental health, accountability, and the ethics of relationships between teachers and students raged on. But for those who knew her, Samantha remained a symbol of how unchecked obsession and despair could spiral into tragedy. The Price home, once filled with hope and promise, stood empty for months. The community of Redwood Falls eventually returned to its routine, but the memory of that night lingered, a chilling reminder of how lives could unravel in the wake of love, betrayal, and obsession. This harrowing chapter of Brandon, Kate, and Samantha's lives would forever serve as a testament to the devastating consequences of secrets and unbridled emotion. The tragic events in Redwood Falls left a lasting impact on everyone involved. It was a story of love, betrayal, and the dangerous consequences of unchecked obsession. A once promising life ended, a family was torn apart, and a quiet Minnesota town was forever changed by the secrets and lies lurking beneath its surface. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping stories like this, and check out another shocking case where a housewife's secret affair with her father-in-law takes a dark turn. Let us know what you think in the comments below.